Hey folks, welcome back to the Edupedia world, and I am Abhinay Gupta. And today again, we will continue with the appointment and remuneration of managerial personnel. Right? So far, if you refer back to the previous lecture, we have discussed who are these managerial personnel, the managers, the managing director, the whole-time director, right? And the various permutation combination of the three. Right. Apart from that, we have been ahead to understand Schedule 5, the appointment and all those things. But always when we were there in the chapter, there has been a reference made to section 197, if you remember. Right. So section 197 that we had is something that we are going to discuss now in this topic. So the wait is over. Now we get ahead directly on section 197, and section 197 is the section that deals with the entire remuneration clause, right? So whatever you think about as part of remuneration is all covered in 197, about what is the limit, what is the maximum limit, what are the different scenarios in profits, in loss, whose approval is required, how is it paid off, what is it components, what are the conditions, like all sorts of things, right? So it's not a very small section, right? But at the same time, it's not a very long section. You have various points, but those points do not need demonstration, right? And why don't they need demonstration is because they are specific, they are facts, they are numbers, okay? And there are certain conditions that we need to check. So it may be a little factual. The fact content of this lecture would be a little higher, but still it's a very simple, plain section to understand. Just try mapping it as I go ahead with the entire lecture. Okay? So when we start with managerial remuneration, the first is the number 11 that you need to remember. Right? Because again, this 11 has to be linked from different zones. So what this section 197 specifically says is that the total managerial remuneration that a company pays to its managerial personnel, whatever be the permutation combination, the total managerial remuneration cannot be paid over 11%. That is one plain statement, right? But again, there are lots of conditions and ifs and buts that are attached to it. But in general, if you want to remember, just remember one simple number, that is 11, and that is cumulative, right? So all the managerial personnel combined, the maximum remuneration paid is 11% of the net profit, right? So your remuneration will never exceed 11% of net profit. Always remember, we're talking about net profit. And that is also for the same financial year. Now, how do you compute the net profit is another question, because we specified very clearly it's net profit. Now, what is that net profit for you, right? So there is another section that comes after this. Yeah, you must be thinking that in every lecture we come up with one section that has to come up in the future, right? But yeah, but that is it. Okay, so there's another section, section 198, that will exactly tell you what net profit is. So please don't apply your brain on that angle. Just understand one thing, it's 11% of net profit, right? And from that 11%, from that net profit, all those things that are given in 198 will be there, except that the remuneration that you are paying to the directors, that shall not be deducted as an expense. Like, so for example, if I'm giving 10 lakh as remuneration, so I have certain incomes in my P&L, I have certain expenditures in my P&L, that those expenditures will not include the figure of 10 lakhs. That is the remuneration given to the directors. So apart from this 10 lakhs, you will calculate a net profit without deducting this 10 lakh. And whatever comes, 11% of that would be distributed as managerial remuneration, right? And then in the final balance sheet, obviously you will also add on that 10 lakh rupees. So this 10 lakh is actually a calculation that has come up without deducting 10 lakhs, right? You remember in your costing and SFM you have done a lot, x plus 1, x plus this, and those kind of formulas, right? Let's not get into it. We'll understand that when we are doing section 198. Now, do you think when we say that the total managerial remuneration cannot exceed 11% of net profit means it actually cannot? See guys, we are studying law, right? So law is never so concrete that if cannot be this, that means cannot be this, because you never know any company that can come up and do anything, and then they can have reasons to justify it. So we'll have to think on an overall scenario, right? So there may be a situation where they have little more number of managerial personnel, so 11% when divided becomes a little smaller figure, maybe, right? Or they're not getting adequate profit, they want to give little more than 11%. So law always leaves some space open. Similarly, over here also you have certain spaces open. So if you want to pay a remuneration which is over 11%, then you need to first pass an ordinary resolution. What do you need to pass? An ordinary resolution in the general meeting. Second, apart from the ordinary resolution, you also require, so therefore it is a plus sign. It's not a slash, it's not or. First pass a resolution in the general meeting, get an approval from the CG, right, central government, and then you also have to comply with the provisions that are contained in Schedule 5. Is it clear? And Schedule 5 means all the parts you can refer to, part 1, 2 and 3, right? And all those parts you have various sections also. We have already covered Schedule 5 in detail. Let's not get back into it, right? The entire lecture will pass away in Schedule 5. So just remember, it's OR in the general meeting. It is the approval of the central government as well as the Schedule 5 that you need to look after, right, and comply with if you want to pay ahead a remuneration of over 11%. Then if we talk about remuneration of MD, WTD or manager, then individually what are the percentages allocated to them, right? So this is 197 subsection 1 and this is the second proviso to 197.1 and the 11% figure was the first proviso to 197 subsection 1. So except with the approval of the company in the general meeting, the remuneration that is payable to a whole-time director or a managing director or a manager shall not exceed individually 5% of the net profit if you have only one of them. If you have a manager, that means you cannot have another manager or any managing director, right? And it's a situation that you don't even have a whole-time director. It's just one manager, for example, or just one MD or just one whole-time director. So if that is a scenario, right? If there is just one of them, then it's 5% of again the same net profit that we are going to see in section 198. So the remuneration cannot be paid more than this, but again the clause says except with the approval of the company in the general meeting. And when they just say approval in general meeting means it's an ordinary resolution. And for this you do not need any CG approval or schedule 5 or something like that. Right? That only goes with the 11% figure. But when you go to an individual thing, if there's just one person, you're giving 5 instead of 5, you want to give 11 because you have room till 11, right? 11 is the maximum the company can give cumulative. If there's just one person, you can give away 11 to him. What's the problem? Just pass a resolution in the general meeting. No requirement of Schedule 5, no requirement of central government or anything. Right? So obviously, you'll not give away 11 because there are other directors also. Maybe not whole time, maybe not manager, maybe not MD, but there are other directors, the ordinary directors of the company. Even they need some money, right? So you'll not give 100% 11, right? It'll be somewhere close to that. Or even if you want to exceed, you have to go to the extent of exceeding the limit of 11%. You'll have to upgrade that limit first with the 3 approvals, right? And then this 5% can be upgraded with just one approval, that is the approval of the members in the board in the general meeting. Right? Now, if there are more than one managerial personnel, that means if it's an MD, if there are two MDs, if there's a whole-time director, right, all these people are there, then you divide it, right? You divide it in whatever ratio you want, but the maximum that you can pay off is 10%. Because at least 1% is something you're going to leave for the ordinary directors, right? So the maximum that you can pay if there are more than one managerial personnel is 10% of the net profit of that financial year. Right? And always remember when you're talking about this net profit from 198, we will not include the managerial remuneration in that net profit calculation. Again, this figure of 10% can also be increased, and to increase it, all the things you need is an approval from the member in the general meeting. That's it. And understand, if you go back and refer, somebody must be thinking, okay, if it's 10, increasing means just 1% is the margin. No, if I want to increase it 12%, what do I do? So understand, my dear friend, the overall limit is 11%. Individually, the managerial personnel limit is 10%. If you want to increase this, means the overall limit also gets exceeded. If this 10% is to be raised to 12%, then the overall limit also exceeds 12% because after paying those 12% to these people, you'll pay something to the ordinary director also. They're not working for free fund, right? Like I don't work for free fund for the company where I'm holding the directorship. They pay me something, whatever be the figure, right? So first you'll have to raise the bar for that 11% limit. And then within that limit, you'll have to set a limit for this 10%. You'll have to increase this 10%. So once you have already raised that bar, you have already taken approval from CG, followed your Schedule 5 and everything, and taken approval from members, you again ask the members, "Okay, see, you have already raised the upper limit for the entire thing. The bar is raised. Now please raise our limit as well." So when you are increasing the limit of 5% or 10%, it will always be only managerial approval. Because anyways, if it is exceeding 11%, then you have already taken approval on the first provision of section 197, subsection 1. Clear with that? I hope that is okay, right? Next, remuneration of ordinary directors. So these have been some special people already that we have seen. MD, WTD, manager, and those people, right? Now we come down to the ordinary people. The ordinary people, their limit is 1% to 3%. Again, except with the approval of the company in the general meeting, the remuneration that will be payable to these ordinary directors, right, or to director who is neither a managing director nor a whole-time director nor a manager. A manager cannot be a director, come on. Right, so a director who is not a managing director, who is not a whole-time director, all other director. I give them the term ordinary director. Don't use the term in the examination. Because as per your section 197, the section does not use the term ordinary director. They say all directors except these two, MD and WTD. Right, please use those words. Just for your understanding, this lecture that I'm taking is for your understanding. Don't quote my statements from the screen, right? This is very much summarized, bullet points, and then this is my language. It's not the language of the law. Why my language? Because I am here just to clear the concept. I'm not here to prepare you completely for the examination, right? As I have already given some disclaimers in the previous lectures, I'll again give those disclaimers. Don't 100% depend only on what I have taught. Topics that I'm taking up is just to help you clarify the particular section, right? There are a lot of sections that the students, like even I was a student once, right? So these sections, they do not seep in. We get jumbled up. So I'm just clarifying those things and bringing it down in the simplest language possible for you. Don't use my language in the examination. You'll have to use the language of the law, right? Don't worry, before your examination, I'll take a lecture where I'll let you know how to write down answers in the examination. Although the same thing I have been pointing out in the initial lectures also when I started with the subject, right? When we were discussing the case studies, there have been many times when I have spoken to you in the language of the law as well. That if it's asked to you in the examination, this is how you're going to write it. So I'll take that lecture of how to prepare and how to attempt for your examination also, right? I'll take it before your examination. How to attempt is a secondary thing. First, you should know what to write, right? How to write that, I'll let you know. Understand what, learn what. Okay. So when you talk about remuneration of ordinary directors, so except with the approval of general meeting, with the approval of the members in the general meeting, the limit is 1% of net profit if the company has employed the managing director or whole-time director or a manager, right? So if any of these people are available, understand it's 11%, right? The total limit. 10% has already been given to them. What is left? 1%. So I don't think this section 192 subsection 1 second provision was required at all. But law specifies everything. Logically, total slab 11%. If there is more than one whole-time director, managing director or manager, you have already given them 10%. What is left for you? 1%. But it's a good news. If these managerial personnel are not there in the company, right? There's no manager, no whole-time director, no managing director. You are lucky because they don't get any money. If they don't get any money, then the 11% is yours. Is it? It's not. 11% of net profit is a very big amount, depending upon the scale of the company, obviously. But percentage-wise, it's huge. And to directors, they won't give away this as salary, right? So your slab, understand, when they are there, the limitation of ordinary directors are just 1%. That will be increased because yes, your workload has increased because the managerial personas are not there. You manage everything. Let's give you some more peanuts. So after 1%, we increase it to 3%. That's it. So with managerial personnel, 1%, without managerial personnel, 3%. So if you look at the entire scenario that we have discussed, the first and second proviso, right? The percentages are very well linked up. Means well calculated, huh? Right? So I hope this calculation will be there in your mind. These figures will stay there in your brain. 11, 5, 10, 1, 3, all these figures. Because if you understand, don't start mugging it up. Apply logic. Total limit 11. Individual managerial personal limit 5. If there are more than 1, then 10. If 10 is given already, what is left is 1. So 1 to ordinary. And if they are not there, then I can increase the limit of ordinary, but to what extent? Maximum 3%. Right? So this one liner that I have just said is actually the crux of whatever we have discussed since the beginning of the lecture. Right? But only if this one liner was enough for you, I don't think you would be sitting for the class. These kind of one liners are there in your textbook. Right? I mean, recently I just received a comment from a student. Right? There's a little bit of extra elaboration. Understand, it's not just one or two students that I'm teaching. Right? Students are of all categories. Some understand, some grab very quick, some don't grab very quick, some are very comfortable with language, English, some are not very comfortable with English. Right? Some take time to seep in, some seep in fast. So I go on an appropriate pace so that it's good for everybody. Because I'm not live with you, I cannot take up your queries. I don't know if something is not understood to you. But when we get ahead with the stories and logics, it seeps in. I hope we are on the same track. I would invite your comments on this lecture as well. That whether it is actually in sync with you. Right? So remuneration of ordinary directors 1 and 3% we have seen. Now, these remuneration also, but mind you, we have been talking about remuneration. These remuneration are to be exclusive of the setting fees. Remuneration and setting fees are two different things. Right? We'll cover what remuneration is basically later in the chapter, or come on, 197 subsection 6 it is. So it's basically remuneration can be some monthly payment, some specified percentage of net profit that you give it to them, right? Or partly monthly payment, partly percentage of profit, whatever it can be. But sitting fees, that is entirely different. If you're attending a meeting, you get a sitting fees for that meeting. If you don't attend a meeting, you don't get it. But that percentage of net profit you always get, right? That monthly payment you always get. But sitting fees you get only when you sit. And sitting fees is not a part of your remuneration. It is entirely a separate scenario. Right? So any remuneration which is paid to the director under the subsection 1 or whatever we have seen, the first and the second proviso, right? First proviso is 11%, second proviso is 5, 10 and 1, 3. All these four figures are second proviso. So whatever we have seen over there, it shall all be exclusive of setting fees. Right? So in case of no inadequate profit, what would be the remuneration? What do you think? We are checking this, right? That company has made no profit, right? Or I could say the company has made inadequate profit. There is no much money for them to distribute as remuneration, right? So what do you think will the company do? Hmm. Yeah, remuneration will depend upon Schedule 5. Sitting fees will be paid. So that is not dependent on any percentage. Understand what I said is remuneration can be a percentage, it can be monthly payment. So suppose if the remuneration is percentage of net profit and you don't have any net profit, so do you get any remuneration? No. Even 80% of 0 is 0, 100% of 0 is 0, and 2% of 0 is 0. So there's no profit means 0. Any percentage of 0 is 0. Right? But sitting fees is not a part of remuneration. So yes, you would be getting that sitting fees. Right? So understand, if the company has no profit or profits are inadequate for the company to meet out their other needs, then the company shall not pay to its directors. When I say directors, I include the managing director and whole-time director as well for this scenario, and I also include the manager who is not the director. So they'll not pay any remuneration, but they'll pay them the sitting fees, and that will be in accordance with the provisions of Schedule 5 and with the previous approval of central government. Okay. Next, if we see, what we have is mode of determination. Determination. Your determination for studies, right? No. We're talking about, when we're talking about the mode of determination, we're talking about the mode of determination of the remuneration. So this is 197 subsection 4 or clause 4, right? So the remuneration which is payable to the director and manager. Director means I include the whole-time director and managing director and the manager of the company. That should be determined by a certain documents, right? How do you determine? We have seen, okay, this may be the maximum limit, this may be the limit, this may be the modes. Come on, that is what the law says. This is the limit. But what you actually give, where do you define? How every year you won't just come up and say, okay, this year let me give this year let me give this. No, it has to be specified somewhere, right? So the remuneration which will be payable to these director and this manager, they will be determined by the article of the company, right? And if you fail to specify something in the article, what do? You get to the second option. And the second option is passing an ordinary resolution, right? But if there are certain situations where the article you have not specified what to give, but you have specified that if you want to give something, you will have to pass a special resolution for the purpose. So in those scenarios, you will have to pass a special resolution in the general meeting, right? That means when the board directors, they form a board, right? The board of directors, that board has no say in determination of the remuneration. They have no power to fix or determine the remuneration that the directors are going to receive, right? But yeah, sometimes they may have a role in concurrence with the shareholders in the general meeting, right? Or if article has already laid down that this is the procedure of calculating the remuneration for them, then since the procedure is laid down, they only have to make the calculation. So that is where the directors play their role. Otherwise, the board has no role in the determination of remuneration for the directors themselves. Clear? Include remuneration from other services. Now, what are other services? Do you understand? See, I'm a director of the company, right? I am equipped to do something else also for the company. That is not my job role, right? But company needs that task to be done. I'm already there. Company says, hey Abhinay, come on, let's do this. I'll say, okay man, let's go ahead with that, right? So the remuneration which is payable to me as a director, it shall be inclusive of the remuneration payable to me for the service which I render in any other capacity, right? So maybe I'm an expert in cost analysis. I'll just take an example. Then the company says, okay, you are there, so our supervision for the cost, you do it, right? Obviously, there are some legal requirements, cost accountants are required, and those things are there. But supervision from the company's end, cross check, that I can do as a director, right? Company says, okay, I'll give you this responsibility as well, and for this, I'll give you an extra remuneration. So understand, whatever limits we have fixed, whatever things we have said, that limit will include all these remuneration that I am providing in some other capacity also, right? Right. Now, if I show you the other slide, continue. We have to talk about the setting fees, mode of payment, remuneration of independent directors, the increase in the remuneration, the consequences of payment in excess remuneration, where it is not applicable on private and government companies and all these things. So if we pick up each topics in detail now, I think we'll stretch for some more time, right? But I'll not want to give you the entire burden on this lecture. So we'll just break the lecture over here, right? These are topics that are pending, but these topics will be picked up in the next lecture, right? So one lecture is divided into two for you, okay? So you know where to pause and where to get started with, because now we have only talked about what they get. Now we'll be discussing a lot more things as well, right? What will be the amount of setting fees and all those things we are yet to discuss. So we'll take up all those topics in the next lecture, right? So until then, this is Abhinay Gupta signing off. Thank you. Bye-bye. I'll see you guys back in the next lecture. Stay tuned.